The massive ships appeared in Earth's orbit without warning. They were dark, angular vessels that blotted out the stars behind them. There were hundreds of them, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. People around the world looked up at the night sky and saw them hanging there like silent threats. Commander Zexthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the blue and green planet below. His scaled skin reflected the dim lights of the control panels. He had conquered 43 worlds for the Valdran Empire, and this would be his 44th. The creatures on this planet called it Earth. To him it was just another prize. He activated the communication system. His message would reach every device on the planet below. When he spoke, his voice was cold and final. "Primitive beings of Earth, I am Commander Zexthor of the Valdran Empire. Your world now belongs to us. You have 72 hours to surrender. Lay down your weapons. Accept your place as servants of the Empire. Resistance will result in your complete destruction." The message ended. Zexthor turned to his second officer. "They will surrender quickly. They always do when they see our fleet." On Earth, the message caused panic in some places and anger in others. In Washington, President Helen Clark rushed into the Emergency Command Center. Military leaders and advisors were already gathering. The faces around the table were grim. Admiral Jack Monroe was the first to speak. "Madam President, we've counted 300 alien warships in orbit. Our entire space defense force consists of 12 orbital platforms and 36 corvette ships. We're completely outmatched." Helen Clark sat down heavily. She had been president for 3 years, but nothing had prepared her for this. "What are our options?" General Pete Harris slammed his fist on the table. "We fight. We don't bow down to these things, whatever they are." "Fight with what?" another advisor asked. "They could destroy us from orbit before we even reach them." "We have to try," Pete insisted. "We can't just give up our freedom without a fight." Across the city, Dr. Lisa Grant was in her laboratory at the International Space Research Center. She had been studying the alien broadcast, not the message itself, but the carrier signal. Embedded in the transmission was data about the aliens themselves. Biological information, atmospheric requirements, gravitational preferences. Her hands moved quickly across her keyboard. The more she discovered, the more her eyes widened. These Valdran came from a world very different from Earth. Their planet had lower gravity, thinner atmosphere, and almost no background radiation. They were efficient creatures perfectly adapted to their world, but that meant they were not adapted to Earth. Lisa grabbed her tablet and ran toward the command center. She had to tell someone what she had found. This information could be important, maybe even critical. Meanwhile, Captain Ryan Cole was on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Valiant. It was one of humanity's newest vessels, equipped with railguns and missile systems, but looking at the alien fleet through his view screen, he knew it wouldn't be enough. "Sir, we have our orders," his first officer said. "We're to engage the enemy and buy time for Earth to prepare." Ryan nodded slowly. He was 32 years old, had a wife and a daughter back on Earth. He had joined the Space Defense Force because he believed in protecting humanity. Now he was being asked to fly into certain death. "Prepare the fleet," he said quietly. "We do our duty." His small group of ships, just 8 corvettes, began moving toward the massive alien armada. It was like watching ants march toward a boot. Back in the command center, Lisa Grant burst through the doors. Guards tried to stop her, but she pushed past them. "President Clark, I need to speak with you immediately." Helen looked up, annoyed at the interruption, but something in Lisa's face made her pause. "Let her through." Lisa approached the table, spreading out her data on the display screen. "I've been analyzing the Valdran biological data from their broadcast. They're not like us. Their world has much lower gravity than Earth. Their bodies are lighter, more fragile. They've never dealt with Earth-level radiation or our atmospheric pressure." "What does that mean?" Helen asked. "It means they're weak by our standards," Lisa explained. "A human soldier would be twice as strong as one of their warriors just because we grew up in Earth's gravity. Our planet is literally twice as heavy as theirs. Every human is like a super soldier compared to them." General Pete Harris leaned forward. "Are you saying we have an advantage?" "Potentially," Lisa said. "But there's more. Their immune systems evolved in a nearly sterile environment. Earth's bacteria and viruses might be deadly to them. They'll need environmental suits just to survive down here." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. They were still vastly outnumbered and outgunned, but maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Admiral Jack Monroe spoke up. Even if individual humans are stronger, they still have 300 warships. We need time to develop a strategy. Captain Cole's fleet is buying us that time, Helen said grimly, at great cost. In space, Ryan Cole watched as the Valdran ships began moving toward his small fleet. Energy weapons charged, glowing with threatening light. He thought about his daughter's smile, his wife's last words to him. Come home safe. He knew he wouldn't be going home, but maybe his sacrifice would mean his family would have a home to live in. All ships, weapons free, he commanded. Make every shot count. For Earth, the small human fleet opened fire. Their weapons were primitive compared to the Valdran technology, but they fought with everything they had. Missiles streaked through the darkness. Railgun rounds tore through space. The Valdran ships barely seemed to notice. They returned fire, and the first human ship exploded in a ball of flame. Then another. Ryan's ship shook as energy blasts struck their shields. On the Valdran flagship, Zexthor watched the primitive ships attacking his fleet. He felt something like amusement. They're brave, at least. Foolish, but brave. Destroy them quickly. But as the battle continued, something unexpected happened. The human ships didn't retreat even when damaged. They kept fighting. One corvette, its engines destroyed, used its last momentum to ram a Valdran destroyer. Both ships exploded. Zexthor's amusement faded. What kind of species sacrifices themselves like this? The battle ended. All 8 human ships were destroyed, but they had taken 3 Valdran vessels with them and damaged several others. For the first time in his career, Zexthor felt uncertain. Back on Earth, the 72-hour countdown had begun. President Helen Clark addressed the world. We have been given an ultimatum by an enemy that believes we are weak. They think we will surrender without a fight. They don't know who we are. They don't know what humans are capable of when defending our home. We will use these 72 hours to prepare. And if they want Earth, they'll have to take it from us. Around the world, people heard her words. Soldiers prepared for battle. Scientists worked on new weapons. Ordinary citizens ready to defend their families. The Valdran had made a terrible mistake. They had declared war on Earth without understanding what that truly meant. The 72 hours passed like a countdown to the end of the world. When the time expired, the Valdran ships began their attack. Bright beams of energy lanced down from orbit, striking major cities across the globe. Buildings that had stood for centuries vanished in seconds. Millions of people died in the first minutes of the invasion. New York's skyline changed forever as entire blocks disappeared. London burned. Tokyo's lights went dark. Mumbai's streets filled with debris and smoke. The world watched in horror as the alien ships demonstrated their terrible power. Commander Zexthor observed the destruction from his flagship. They still have not surrendered. Continue the bombardment. Target their government centers and military bases. His tactical officer hesitated. Commander, some of our ammunition reserves are lower than expected after the skirmish with their ships. It doesn't matter, Zexthor said. This will be over soon. Begin landing ground troops. Occupy the major cities. Show them the power of the Valdran Empire. Across Earth, massive landing craft descended from the alien fleet. They touched down in strategic locations near the devastated cities. Ramps lowered, and Valdran soldiers marched out in precise formations. They wore dark armor and carried weapons that crackled with energy. There were thousands of them, ready to claim Earth as their prize. In the ruins of Chicago, former Marine Danny Wright crouched behind a collapsed building. He was 40 years old, had served 2 tours in the Middle East, and thought his fighting days were over. Now he led a group of 30 civilians and soldiers, all that remained in this sector of the city. They're coming, whispered Kelly Barnes next to him. She had been a track athlete before the invasion, training for the Olympics. Now she carried a rifle scavenged from a destroyed military depot. Danny watched the Valdran troops advance through the rubble. They moved carefully, weapons ready. They expected terrified humans to flee or hide. They were about to learn differently. Wait for my signal, Danny whispered to his people. Remember what Dr. Grant told us. They're weaker than us. Their armor is the only thing keeping them alive in our atmosphere. The Valdran soldiers reached the ambush point. Danny gave the signal. His people opened fire from multiple directions. The aliens scattered, seeking cover. Some fired back, their energy weapons cutting through concrete and steel. But something strange happened. The Valdran soldiers moved slowly, awkwardly. In Earth's gravity, they struggled to run. When human bullets struck their armor, The impacts knocked them down harder than expected. One Valdran soldier took a hit to the shoulder. The injury wasn't fatal, but the soldier collapsed, unable to continue fighting. A human soldier with a similar wound kept fighting, gritting his teeth through the pain. Danny saw this and understood. Dr. Lisa Grant had been right. These aliens were fragile compared to humans. He pressed the attack. The firefight lasted 10 minutes. When it ended, 12 Valdran soldiers were down. The rest retreated, dragging their wounded. Danny's group had lost 4 people, but they had won. They had actually beaten the aliens in combat. On the Valdran flagship, reports began flooding in from ground commanders. The invasion was not going as planned. Humans were fighting back with unexpected ferocity. Wounded humans continued to attack. Dead humans required confirmation kills. The fighting was brutal and exhausting, Commander. One officer reported nervously. Our troops are requesting environmental support. The planet's atmosphere is causing problems. Several soldiers have reported illness from atmospheric contamination. Zexthor's scaled face tightened. Impossible. We analyzed the atmosphere. It should be tolerable. The analysis didn't account for the biological factors, sir. The air is full of microscopic organisms. Our immune systems are struggling to adapt. This was new information, troubling information. Zexthor had conquered worlds before, but never one quite like this. At the International Space Research Center, Dr. Lisa Grant worked frantically with Colonel Amy Stevens. Amy was a strategic planner, brilliant at seeing patterns and finding weaknesses. Together, they were developing a defense strategy based on Earth's natural advantages. The bacteria count in Earth's atmosphere is thousands of times higher than their homeworld, Lisa explained, pointing at her screens. Every breath they take is an assault on their immune systems. They need those suits, but the suits aren't perfect. Amy smiled grimly. So if we can breach their suits, we can incapacitate them without killing them. Exactly. And there's more. Earth's gravity is 1.8 times their standard. Every movement takes more energy for them. They'll tire quickly in sustained combat. What about our people? Amy asked. How do we maximize our advantages? Lisa pulled up more data. Human endurance is our greatest weapon. We evolved as persistence hunters. We can keep going long after they collapse from exhaustion. Our soldiers need to use hit-and-run tactics. Wear them down. The information was quickly distributed to resistance fighters around the world. In every occupied zone, humans began adapting their tactics. They avoided direct confrontation with massed Valdran forces. Instead, they struck fast and disappeared, forcing the aliens to chase them through difficult terrain. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, Admiral Jack Monroe gathered what remained of Earth's space fleet. They had lost Captain Ryan Cole and his heroes, but their sacrifice had bought time. Now Monroe had a plan. We can't match their firepower, he told his commanders via secure channel, but we can match their cunning. We use the asteroids as cover. We hit them and run. We make them waste ammunition chasing us. Captain Sophie Turner, commanding one of the few remaining destroyers, nodded. Guerrilla warfare in space. I like it. It's dangerous, Monroe warned. We'll lose ships, but every Valdran vessel we damage is one less threatening Earth. The human fleet scattered among the asteroids. They waited like predators in tall grass. When a Valdran patrol came searching, the humans struck. Missiles launched from behind asteroid cover. Railguns fired and the ships immediately relocated. The Valdran returned fire, but the humans were already gone, hidden behind massive space rocks. One Valdran destroyer exploded when a human missile found its reactor. Another was crippled by railgun fire. The remaining Valdran ships pulled back, frustrated and confused. How were these primitive humans fighting so effectively? Back on Earth, the war entered its second week. Danny Wright's resistance cell in Chicago had grown to over 100 fighters. They controlled several city blocks and had repelled 3 Valdran assaults. Other resistance groups reported similar successes. In the deep jungles of South America, Valdran troops found themselves completely out of their element. The humidity destroyed their equipment. The temperature fluctuations made them sick. Local fighters, comfortable in the oppressive heat, picked them off one by one. In the mountains of Nepal, Valdran soldiers struggled with the thin air and steep terrain. Human fighters, adapted to the altitude, ran circles around them. The oceans became no-go zones for the Valdran. Human submarines operated freely, and any alien ship that landed near water was immediately targeted. The Valdran simply couldn't handle Earth's extreme environments. Dr. Lisa Grant made another breakthrough. Working with samples from captured Valdrin equipment, she developed a modified bacterial agent. It wouldn't kill the aliens, but it would make them violently ill. She called it the Plague Protocol. We can introduce it through their ventilation systems, she explained to President Helen Clark. Within hours, their ground troops will be too sick to fight. They'll have to retreat to their ships for medical treatment. Helen considered this. Is it humane? More humane than killing them, Lisa replied. And it might end this war faster, saving human lives. Do it, Helen ordered. The Plague Protocol was deployed through aerial dispersal over occupied zones. Within a day, Valdrin soldiers began falling ill. Their suits filtered some of the bacteria, but not all. Commanders reported entire units incapacitated. Medical facilities on the Valdrin ships were overwhelmed. Zexthor stood on his bridge, watching the reports with growing alarm. This was supposed to be an easy conquest. Earth was supposed to be a primitive world, but these humans were fighting with a desperation and effectiveness he had never encountered. Sir, we've lost contact with 3 more ground units, an officer reported. The humans are overrunning our positions. Pull back, Zexthor ordered. Withdraw ground forces to the landing zones. We'll reassess our strategy. As Valdrin troops retreated, human fighters celebrated. They had driven the aliens back. Earth was proving harder to conquer than anyone had imagined. In space, Admiral Monroe launched his boldest attack yet. Using captured Valdrin technology to mask their signatures, a human strike force approached the enemy fleet near Mars. Captain Sophie Turner led the attack. They targeted a Valdrin carrier group, the ships carrying supplies and reinforcements. The battle was fierce. Human ships took terrible damage, but they pressed forward with reckless courage. One human destroyer rammed a Valdrin supply ship, both exploding in a flash of light. But the sacrifice worked. The carrier group was destroyed. News of the victory spread across Earth. Against impossible odds, humanity had won a major battle in space. The Valdrin fleet was bleeding. More importantly, the victory proved something crucial to the watching galaxy. Earth could fight back. 3 months into the war, Earth was battered but unbroken. Cities lay in ruins, millions had died, but humanity refused to surrender. The Valdrin Empire was learning a hard lesson about underestimating their enemy. Commander Zexthor paced his bridge, his confidence shaken. The reports from the Valdrin High Command were not encouraging. They questioned his leadership, demanded explanations for why a simple conquest had become a prolonged war. Worse, they refused to send reinforcements. You have sufficient forces to conquer one primitive planet, the High Command had told him. End this quickly or face consequences. But Zexthor was beginning to understand that Earth was anything but primitive. These humans were survivors, fighters who refused to accept defeat. Every tactical advantage the Valdrin possessed was being countered by human adaptability. Prepare for orbital bombardment of major population centers, Zexthor ordered. If we cannot break their military, we will break their spirit. On Earth, General Pete Harris coordinated the global resistance from a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Communication networks were damaged but functional. Reports came in from every continent showing the same pattern. Wherever Valdrin troops landed, humans found ways to resist. The enemy is preparing something big, Pete told his staff. Our satellites detected power buildups in their orbital weapons. They're going to hit civilian targets to make us surrender. We need to strike first, Colonel Amy Stevens said. She had become one of Pete's most trusted advisors. Hit them where it hurts. Their supply lines, Pete agreed. If we can disrupt their logistics, they can't sustain a prolonged bombardment. Plans were made quickly. Resistance cells around the world received their orders. Target Valdrin supply depots, communication relays, and fuel reserves. Make the enemy pay for every shot they fired at Earth. In the ruins of London, Kelly Barnes led her team through the underground tunnels. The old subway system had become a highway for resistance fighters. Her target was a Valdrin fuel depot 2 miles from their current position. Kelly had changed since the war began. The Olympic athlete was now a hardened fighter, lean and dangerous. She moved through the darkness with confidence, her team following silently behind her. They emerged near the depot. Valdrin guards patrolled the perimeter, but they moved slowly, tired from the constant fighting and Earth's oppressive gravity. Kelly signaled her team. They spread out, taking positions. The attack was swift and brutal. Human fighters opened fire from multiple angles. The Valdrin guards tried to respond, but they were too slow. Within minutes, the depot was in human hands. Kelly's team planted explosives and retreated. The explosion lit up the London sky, destroying enough fuel to power Valdrin ships for weeks. Similar attacks happened across the globe. In Beijing, a resistance team destroyed a Valdrin communication hub. In Cairo, fighters sabotaged an alien weapons cache. In São Paulo, a supply convoy was ambushed and destroyed. The Valdrin logistics network began to collapse. Ships in orbit found themselves rationing power and ammunition. Ground troops went without resupply. Zexthor's planned bombardment had to be scaled back dramatically. Dr. Lisa Grant was working on something new in her laboratory. She had been studying captured Valdrin technology for weeks, and now she understood how their computer systems worked. They were advanced but rigid, following predictable patterns. "I can create a virus," she explained to a video conference with military leaders. "Something that will infiltrate their network and cause system failures. Navigation, weapons control, communication, everything. How do we deliver it?" asked Admiral Jack Monroe from his ship near Jupiter. "We need to get close to their flagship," Lisa said. "Upload the virus directly to their central network. From there, it will spread to every connected ship." "That's a suicide mission," Monroe said quietly. "Maybe not." Lieutenant Jake Nelson spoke up. He was young, only 25, but he had survived the Mars engagement and become one of humanity's best pilots. "What if we use a captured Valdrin shuttle? Disguise ourselves as one of their supply runs?" The plan was desperate and dangerous, but it was the best chance they had. Jake volunteered to lead the mission. He assembled a small team of engineers and pilots, all of them knowing they might not return. Meanwhile, on the Valdrin flagship, Zexthor received disturbing news from his homeworld. The war with Earth was causing problems throughout the Valdrin Empire. Subject species on other worlds were asking questions. If humans could resist, why couldn't they? Rebellion was stirring in distant systems. "This is unacceptable," Zexthor hissed. "These primitive creatures are undermining the entire empire with their resistance." "Perhaps we should negotiate," his second officer suggested carefully. "A peace treaty would end the war and restore order." Zexthor's eyes flashed with anger. "The Valdrin Empire does not negotiate with lesser species. We conquer or we destroy. There is no middle ground." But even as he said this, Zexthor knew the truth. The war was going badly. His fleet was damaged, his troops demoralized, his supply lines broken. He needed a victory, something decisive to turn the tide. In the asteroid belt, Jake Nelson piloted the captured Valdrin shuttle toward the enemy fleet. His heart pounded as they approached the massive warships. The shuttle's identification codes were legitimate, taken from a destroyed Valdrin supply ship. But would it be enough? "Shuttle Kren 7, state your business," came a voice over the communication channel. Jake responded in broken Valdrin language, using phrases they had learned from a prisoner. "Supply delivery, critical components for the flagship." There was a pause that seemed to last forever. "Then proceed to docking bay 7, they were in." Jake and his team docked with the flagship, their hands sweating inside their stolen Valdrin suits. The disguises were good but not perfect. They had to move quickly. A Valdrin officer met them at the docking bay. "You're late. The commander has been waiting for these parts." Jake nodded, not trusting his voice. His team carried containers that supposedly held ship components. Actually, they contained weapons and Lisa's virus on a portable drive. They were escorted through the ship's corridors. Jake memorized the layout, counting guards and noting security systems. The Valdrin were on high alert, but they didn't suspect the supply crew. Why would they? The humans weren't supposed to be capable of such infiltration. Their escort led them to a storage area near the ship's computer core. Perfect. While the others created a distraction, Jake slipped away. He found an access terminal and plugged in Lisa's virus. The upload began. Progress crawled across the screen. 10%. 20%. Jake heard shouts from nearby. The distraction had started, but it also meant their time was running out. 50%. Footsteps echoed in the corridor, running toward his position. Jake drew his weapon with one hand while watching the upload with the other. 75%. A Valdrin guard appeared in the doorway. Their eyes met. The alien reached for his weapon. Jake fired first. The guard fell, but the shot would bring more, 90%. Jake could hear multiple footsteps now, an entire security team converging on his position. He prepared to make his last stand 100%. Upload complete. Jake yanked the drive free and ran. He burst out of the room, firing at the approaching guards. His team materialized from the chaos, covering his retreat. Together, they fought their way back to the shuttle. The docking bay was in chaos. Alarms blared throughout the ship. Valdren soldiers poured into the bay. Jake's team made it to the shuttle and sealed the doors. Energy bolts hammered against the hull as Jake fired up the engines. "We're not going to make it," someone said as the shuttle shook from impacts. "Yes, we are," Jake growled. He engaged full thrust, tearing away from the flagship without following proper departure procedures. The shuttle scraped against the docking bay walls, alarms screaming, but they were free. Behind them, Lisa's virus began to spread. It moved through the Valdren network like wildfire, jumping from ship to ship. Navigation systems failed. Weapons targeting went offline. Communication channels filled with static. On the bridge of his flagship, Zexthor watched in horror as his entire fleet fell into chaos. Ships drifted out of formation. Some collided with each other. The carefully coordinated armada became a scattered mess of disabled vessels. "What's happening?" Zexthor demanded. "Unknown virus in the system, Commander. It's spreading too fast to stop." "All primary systems are failing." Zexthor realized the truth. The humans had done this. Somehow, impossibly. They had infiltrated his flagship and sabotaged the fleet. These weren't primitive creatures. They were dangerous, clever, and they were winning. On Earth, Admiral Monroe saw the Valdren fleet fall into disarray on his sensors. He didn't know what had caused it, but he knew an opportunity when he saw one. "All ships, attack now," he ordered. "Hit them while they're down." The human fleet, reinforced with retrofitted civilian vessels and mining ships, surged forward. They struck at the crippled Valdren armada with everything they had. Ships that couldn't defend themselves became easy targets. The Valdren fleet, once so mighty, was being torn apart. In the chaos, Jake Nelson's shuttle made its escape. They had done the impossible. They had struck at the heart of the enemy and survived. More importantly, they had given Earth a fighting chance. The virus had done its work perfectly. Half of the Valdren fleet drifted helplessly in space. Their systems locked in endless restart cycles. The remaining ships struggled to maintain basic functions. Commander Zexthor's mighty armada was crippled, vulnerable for the first time since arriving at Earth. Admiral Jack Monroe pressed the advantage. His fleet, a mix of military vessels and armed civilian ships, tore into the Valdren formation. Human crews fought with renewed hope, knowing that victory was finally possible. "Target their weapon systems," Monroe ordered. "Disable, don't destroy when possible. We want their technology intact." The battle raged for hours. Human ships darted between the massive Valdren vessels, exploiting their inability to coordinate defenses. Where Valdren tactics relied on fleet-wide coordination, human commanders made independent decisions, adapting to changing conditions instantly. Captain Sophie Turner commanded a retrofitted mining vessel called the Mountain. It wasn't elegant, but it was tough and powerful. She brought it alongside a Valdren cruiser and fired mining lasers at close range. The Valdren ship's shields were down, its weapons silent. The laser cut through armor plating, targeting the ship's power core. "Direct hit," her weapons officer reported. "Their reactor is shutting down." "Good," Sophie said. "Next target." But not all the Valdren ships were helpless. Some had purged the virus from their systems. They fought back with devastating firepower. A human destroyer exploded under concentrated fire. 2 corvettes were crippled and forced to retreat. On Earth, the ground war was turning in humanity's favor. With the Valdren fleet in chaos, orbital support for their ground troops disappeared. Supplies stopped coming. Reinforcements never arrived. Valdren soldiers found themselves isolated and surrounded. Danny Wright led his fighters through the streets of Chicago, pushing toward a Valdren stronghold. The enemy had fortified an entire city block, but without air support they were vulnerable. "They're trapped," Danny told Kelly Barnes as they studied the enemy position. "No supplies, no backup. They'll have to surrender or die." "The Valdren don't surrender," Kelly reminded him. "Their culture doesn't allow it. Then they'll learn a new way today." The assault began at dawn. Human fighters attacked from multiple directions, using their superior strength and endurance to overwhelm Valdren defensive positions. The aliens fought desperately, but Earth's gravity wore them down. Soldiers who had seemed unstoppable weeks ago now struggled to even stand after hours of combat. By midday, the stronghold fell. Valdren soldiers threw down their weapons, too exhausted to continue. It was the first mass surrender of the war. Danny Wright found himself face to face with a Valdran officer, a young commander whose armor was scorched and dented. "You fought well," Danny said through a translator device. "Your resistance is over." The Valdran officer looked at him with something like respect. "You are not what we expected. We were told you were primitive, weak. We were wrong." Similar scenes played out across the planet. In Tokyo, Valdran troops surrendered after a week-long siege. In Berlin, the last alien holdouts were captured without a fight. Mumbai's occupiers withdrew to their ships, defeated. Dr. Lisa Grant studied the captured Valdran technology with growing excitement. Every piece of equipment told her more about these aliens and their empire. She discovered something that changed everything. "They're not the top of their hierarchy," she explained to President Helen Clark. "The Valdran Empire has dozens of subject species. They've conquered over 40 worlds, enslaving the inhabitants. Earth was just supposed to be number 44. Helen's eyes narrowed. "So there are other species under Valdran control? Species that might want freedom?" "Exactly. And here's the interesting part. If we share our resistance strategies with them, if we show them that the Valdran can be beaten, we could spark a galaxy-wide rebellion," Helen finished. "The Valdran Empire could collapse from within." This information became a weapon. Colonel Amy Stevens worked with communications experts to broadcast a message beyond Earth's solar system. It was a simple message, but powerful. Earth had resisted. Earth had won battles against the Valdran. Freedom was possible. The message reached distant worlds. On planets conquered decades ago, subject species heard about humanity's resistance. Whispers of rebellion began. If primitive humans could fight the Valdran, surely they could too. In the Valdran High Command, panic set in. The Earth situation had gone from embarrassing to catastrophic. Not only was the conquest failing, but it was inspiring insurrection throughout the Empire. Emergency sessions were called. Commanders argued about what to do. Withdraw from Earth, some argued. Cut our losses before this spreads further. No, others insisted. We must crush the humans completely. Show the galaxy what happens to those who resist. Commander Zexthor received his orders through a heavily encrypted channel. The High Command had made their decision. He was to use any means necessary to end the war. Any means, even the forbidden weapons. On his flagship, Zexthor stood before a sealed vault. Inside was a weapon the Valdran Empire kept for absolute emergencies. A planet killer. It would turn Earth's atmosphere into poison and scour all life from the surface. It was monstrous, but Zexthor was desperate. "Begin charging the weapon," he ordered quietly. "Target the entire planet." His officers stared at him in shock. "Commander, that will kill billions. It violates every treaty, every law of warfare." "Do you want to explain to the High Command why we failed?" Zexthor snapped. "This ends now. Either Earth surrenders in the next hour or Earth dies." The weapon began charging. It would take time to reach full power, but once activated, nothing could stop it. Earth would become a lifeless rock, a warning to any who dared resist the Valdran Empire. Admiral Monroe's sensors detected the energy buildup. His face went pale as he understood what he was seeing. "Get me the president," he ordered urgently. "Now." Within minutes, every major leader on Earth knew the truth. The Valdran were preparing to destroy the planet. They had minutes, maybe an hour at most, before the weapon fired. President Helen Clark addressed the world one last time. "We have fought bravely. We have shown the galaxy what humanity can do. But now we face the ultimate threat. The enemy will destroy our world rather than admit defeat. We will not surrender, but we may not survive. I'm proud of every person who stood against tyranny. History will remember Earth's courage." But Lieutenant Jake Nelson had a different idea. He was still in space, his shuttle damaged but functional. He had heard the broadcast about the planet killer. He knew where it was. The weapon was mounted on the Valdran flagship. "I can stop it," he said to his crew. "We can ram the flagship, destroy the weapon before it fires." His crew looked at each other. They were exhausted, wounded, ready to go home. But home would not exist if the weapon fired. "We're with you," his co-pilot said. The others nodded agreement. Jake plotted a course toward the Valdran flagship. His small shuttle accelerated, pushing its damaged engines to maximum. Warning lights flashed. Systems overheated, but they flew on. Captain Sophie Turner saw Jake's shuttle on her sensors. She understood immediately what he was planning. "No," she whispered, then louder to her crew. "Change course. Full speed to the Valdran flagship, Captain." Her first officer asked, confused. That kid is going to sacrifice himself to save Earth, Sophie said. But he doesn't have to do it alone. We're going with him. The Mountain, the tough old mining vessel, turned toward the enemy flagship. Its engines roared to life, building speed. All ships, Sophie broadcast on an open channel. The enemy is preparing to destroy Earth. We can stop them, but it will cost everything. Who's with me? Across the human fleet, ships changed course. Dozens of vessels, military and civilian, damaged and whole, all turned toward the Valdran flagship. Their crews knew what this meant. They were flying to their deaths. But they were saving their world. Admiral Monroe watched the ships accelerate toward the enemy. Tears streamed down his face. These were his people, his fleet. They were heroes, every one of them. On the Valdran flagship, Zexthor saw the human ships approaching. At first he thought they were attacking conventionally. Then he understood. They were going to ram him. Evasive action, he ordered. But his ship was too large, too slow. The virus had damaged the maneuvering systems. They could not escape. Planet killer at 90% charge, an officer reported. Jake Nelson's shuttle reached the flagship first. The small vessel slammed into the weapon array at full speed. The explosion was brilliant, but not enough. The weapon was damaged, but still charging. Then Sophie Turner's Mountain arrived. The massive mining ship, all that retrofitted power and armor, struck the flagship like a hammer. The impact drove deep into the Valdran vessel's hull. The weapon array tore apart. Secondary explosions rippled through the flagship. More human ships arrived, ramming different sections of the massive vessel. Each impact shook the flagship. Crew members were thrown from their stations. Hull breaches opened across multiple decks. The planet killer weapon, 98% charged, exploded catastrophically. The blast tore the Valdran flagship in half. The two pieces drifted apart, lifeless and dark. Commander Zexthor died, never understanding how badly he had miscalculated. These humans were not weak. They were not primitive. The destruction of the Valdran flagship sent shockwaves through what remained of the alien fleet. With their commander dead and their planet-killer weapon destroyed, the Valdran forces fell into complete disarray. Ships began powering down their weapons. Some tried to flee toward the edge of the solar system. Others simply drifted, their crews too shocked to respond. Admiral Jack Monroe seized the moment. All Valdran vessels, this is Admiral Monroe of Earth Defense Command. Your flagship is destroyed. Your weapon is gone. You have one chance to survive. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. For a long moment there was silence. Then one by one Valdran ships began signaling their surrender. It started with smaller vessels, cruisers, and destroyers. Then the larger ships followed. Within an hour, the entire Valdran fleet had laid down arms. On Earth, people emerged from shelters and bunkers. They looked up at the sky and saw the alien ships, dark and silent. News spread quickly. The war was over. Earth had won. In Chicago, Danny Wright stood among the ruins of the city. Around him, his fighters cheered and embraced. Some cried with relief. Others simply sat down, too exhausted to celebrate. Kelly Barnes walked over to Danny, her face streaked with dirt and tears. We did it, she said quietly. We actually did it. Danny nodded, unable to speak. He thought of all the people who hadn't survived to see this moment. Captain Ryan Cole and his fleet who bought them time at the beginning. Lieutenant Jake Nelson and Captain Sophie Turner who saved Earth in the final moments. Millions of civilians who died in the bombardments. The victory was real, but the cost was staggering. President Helen Clark addressed the world from the emergency command bunker. Her face was tired but proud. People of Earth, the war is over. The Valdran forces have surrendered. We have achieved what seemed impossible. We defended our world against a vast empire, but we must not forget the price. Millions died. Cities lie in ruins. Families are broken. We won the war, but now we must win the peace. The captured Valdran soldiers and crew members were processed as prisoners of war. Dr. Lisa Grant interviewed many of them, learning about the Valdran Empire and the galaxy beyond Earth. What she discovered was both fascinating and troubling. The Valdran Empire controlled 43 star systems, each with indigenous populations forced into servitude. The empire was built on conquest and oppression, but it was also fragile. News of Earth's resistance had already reached several of these worlds. Rebellions were beginning. The empire is collapsing, Lisa reported to the president. Our resistance inspired others. Within months, the Valdran might lose everything they've built over centuries. Good, Helen said firmly. Any empire built on slavery deserves to fall. But there was a complication. A Valdran delegation requested a meeting. They claimed to represent a faction within the empire that opposed the war. Colonel Amy Stevens was suspicious, but Helen agreed to hear them out. The Valdran delegates were brought to a secure location under heavy guard. They were led by an elderly Valdran named Kethral, who had served in their government for decades. Through translators, he spoke to the human leaders. "We come seeking peace," Kethral said. "The high command that ordered this war has been overthrown. Those who survived your resistance now face justice on our homeworld. We wish to end hostilities and negotiate a treaty." General Pete Harris was skeptical. "Why should we trust you? Your people tried to enslave us." "Because we have no choice," Kethral answered honestly. "Your resistance has shattered our empire. Rebellions burn on a dozen worlds. Our military is broken. We must have peace with Earth or we will have nothing." The negotiations took weeks. Earth's demands were simple but firm. Complete Valdran withdrawal from Earth's solar system, reparations for the damage and deaths caused by the invasion, and most importantly, freedom for all species enslaved by the Valdran Empire. The Valdran delegates resisted the last demand. "If we free all subject species, our empire will cease to exist." "Then it ceases to exist," Helen Clark said coldly. "That is not our problem. You declared war on us, you lost. These are the terms." In the end, the Valdran had no choice but to agree. The Treaty of Earth was signed in the ruins of New York City, a symbolic location showing both the destruction caused by the war and humanity's determination to rebuild. The Valdran fleet departed Earth's solar system, carrying their prisoners home and leaving behind a changed galaxy. Subject species across the empire declared independence. Some formed their own governments. Others asked Earth for guidance on building free societies. Humanity found itself thrust onto the galactic stage in a way no one had anticipated. They were no longer isolated on one planet. They were liberators, inspiration for a galaxy-wide freedom movement. Dr. Lisa Grant and Colonel Amy Stevens stood in the International Space Research Center, looking at star charts. The galaxy suddenly seemed smaller and more accessible. "What do we do now?" Lisa asked. "We rebuild," Amy said. "We mourn our dead, heal our wounds, and then we reach out to the stars. But this time we go as friends, not conquerors." The rebuilding of Earth began immediately. Cities were cleared of rubble. New structures rose from the ruins. Technology captured from the Valdran accelerated human development by decades. Energy systems, medical advances, space travel capabilities all improved dramatically. But Earth also built defenses. The war had taught hard lessons. The galaxy was dangerous and humanity needed to be ready. New ships were constructed, combining human ingenuity with Valdran technology. Orbital platforms were upgraded. A true space fleet began to take shape. 6 months after the war ended, Earth launched its first diplomatic mission to a former Valdran subject world. The mission was led by Kelly Barnes, the former athlete who had become a hero of the resistance. She carried a simple message from humanity. "We believe in freedom. We believe in cooperation. We will never bow to tyrants and we will help others stand against oppression." The mission was a success. Trade agreements were established. Cultural exchanges began. Humanity was building bridges across the galaxy. On Earth, a memorial was constructed in Geneva for all those who died in the war. Names were carved into black stone, thousands upon thousands of them. A statue stood at the center showing Captain Sophie Turner and Lieutenant Jake Nelson, representing all who sacrificed everything for Earth's freedom. Danny Wright attended the dedication ceremony. He stood with other survivors, remembering friends and comrades who hadn't made it. General Pete Harris gave a speech honoring the fallen. President Helen Clark laid a wreath at the base of the statue. "They saved us all," Helen said to the assembled crowd. "They showed the galaxy what humanity represents. Courage, sacrifice, and an unbreakable will to be free. We will never forget them." As the ceremony ended, people looked up at the night sky. The stars seemed different now. They weren't just distant lights. They were destinations, possibilities, new frontiers to explore. Admiral Jack Monroe stood in the command center of Earth's new flagship, the Liberty. It was the most advanced vessel humanity had ever built, a combination of human engineering and captured Valdran technology. From its bridge, he could coordinate Earth's growing space fleet. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the outer colonies," a communications officer reported. They're requesting assistance with a trade dispute. Monroe smiled. Tell them we're on our way. That's what we do now. We help instead of hurt. The Liberty moved out of orbit, heading toward the edge of the solar system. Behind it, Earth continued its transformation. Scars from the war were slowly healing. Humanity was recovering its strength, but something had changed fundamentally. Earth was no longer naive about the galaxy. They knew there were dangers out there, empires and threats beyond imagination, but they also knew they could face those dangers. The Valdren had made a terrible mistake when they declared war on Earth. They thought they were conquering a primitive world. Instead, they awakened a sleeping giant. They discovered that humans weren't weak creatures to be enslaved. Humans were survivors from a death world, forged by gravity and disease and countless challenges into the most adaptable species in the galaxy. Other civilizations watched Earth's emergence with mixed feelings. Some saw potential allies, others saw a new threat, but all of them understood one thing clearly. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and the galaxy would never be the same. Dr. Lisa Grant published her findings about Earth's unique characteristics. The paper became famous across multiple star systems. She explained how Earth's high gravity, rich atmosphere, and disease-filled environment had created humans who were stronger, tougher, and more resilient than most other species. We are apex predators from a world that tried to kill us every day, she wrote. We are persistence hunters who never give up. We are problem solvers who adapt to any challenge. The Valdren didn't lose because we had better weapons. They lost because they didn't understand what we really are. The galaxy took note. Trade increased as species sought Earth's unique perspectives and innovations, but military alliances formed as well. Humanity's reputation as fierce warriors spread. No one wanted Earth as an enemy. Years passed. The Valdren Empire fragmented completely. Its former territory divided among freed species and new governments. Earth maintained diplomatic relations with the new Valdren Republic.